بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه وعلى كل من تبع هداه إلى يوم الدين ثم أما بعد. Dear respected brothers and sisters, just before I start with the paper, I'd like to say a few things. Reading through this part of history intensively is enough to tear a person apart. Going through what happened, it is already difficult, and I believe if anyone is reading with their hearts from any side, they are going to feel like torn apart and sad for whatever happened at that time. I tried to avoid those sort of topics all my life, but once I moved to the West, I found that it was difficult, and because of what's going on, it was important to address these issues and tackle them and try to overcome them, try to come to an agreement that we have differences, we disagree on some things, there are different interpretations of the text, there are different views. So I urge everyone, when you're listening today, listen with a mind that is trying to explore the possibilities, yeah? Not just a mind that knows what is going to be presented, because I'm not going to say something that is new. It's a mind that is exploring what actually happened. Is that possible? The other opinion? Maybe. It could be. Who knows? So that should be the attitude of everyone who is present today. Exploring. I was reading the text while preparing for the presentation, and at the same time, I wasn't just compiling texts as much as I was educating myself on the topic and exploring the possibility, trying to answer some of the questions, trying to search for an answer for a question that I don't know. This is the only way that we can come to an understanding, right? So, as you know, the topic today about the incident of Al-Ghadeer, and I'll talk about several points, but I will be brief about it because a lot of the information are already known to our respected guests. So I'm just going to touch on the very crucial and important points, because even just talking about the hadith and the different narration will take my 20 minutes of the presentation. So I'm just going to start with the historical and religious literature. Like what the people of Sunnah believe about the incident of Al-Ghadeer, and what about the side of the people of the Shia? Do the people of Ahl Sunnah actually believe in what happened? To what extent? What part of the hadith they believe in? What part they think it's extra? What part they say it's da'if? What are the different narrations? So I'm just going to start with the background information and ask the question that do the Sunni scholars consider this event authentic, like as a whole? Later I'm going to go to the details. Yes, they do. The hadith that were narrated regarding Al-Ghadeer, they reach the level of at-tawatur from both Sunnah and Shia. So the incident is at the highest authenticity that a hadith can be from both sides. As collectively, when we go into the details, there will be differences in the matn, the text of the narration itself. But when you look at the actual hadith and even the some of the extra parts that are accepted by the Sunni scholars, you will find that the hadith is in Sahih Imam Bukhari and Imam Muslim and Tirmidhi and Abi Dawood and Musnad al-Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, countless. And this is because of the nature of the event. It was after Hajj and the Muslims and the gathering, so not only one companion heard it, not two, not 10, not 100. So the narrations were very strong that the ulama of hadith from both sides, they agreed that it reaches the stage and the level of tawatur. So because whilst researching, and sometimes a person would say something, I'll be surprised. No. There are people who think and believe that the people of a Sunnah deny the event. Sometimes you don't have enough information and you think because that event is considered the one where the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ appointed Imam Ali as a Khalifa. So, you know, by default, they would think that the Sunni Muslim would deny it. So it was just a perception, and then they carry on like this. No, so the hadith is mutawatir. The hadith is hadith mutawatir, and for those who have, like, you know, some knowledge of ilm al-hadith, this is the highest form of like the authenticity in hadith, in both sides. Going into the details about the narration and things is not of a paramount importance at that time. So I'm going to move on and just talk about, like, afterwards, what are the difference. I'm just going to touch on the points about the difference in narration, and we're going to talk about them towards the end to see the implication of the changes. So, for example, the first part of the hadith talking about the incident and the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, like they made like a pulpit for him, a minbar, and he started delivering the khutbah and talking to the people, and towards the end the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam started giving them the advice of what they have to hold on to, and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioned the Quran and the people of the family of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. In other narrations, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam talked about Quran and Sunnah, but the narration that says wa ahlu bayti or wa itrati is accepted by the Sunni scholars as well as highly authentic. So this part is not denied as well. And then comes to the part that says Allahumma wali man wala, when the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam makes the dua for Sayyidina Ali, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala become a wali of the people who makes him wali. And there is another additional part in a different narration by the like, you know, the Sunni scholars, wa'adi man ada, which is the opposite part. Like some of the ulama said it's very weak, including Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah, but then even Imam al-Albani, like, you know, one of the highly regarded ulama of hadith by Ahl Sunnah, he said no, that Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah, he rushed to this conclusion, maybe based on the atmosphere or whatever happened, but it is authentic and it does not contradict, because the first part is highly authentic, Allahumma wali man wala, and it's even conveyed in that part that wa'adi man ada is included. If you are a wali of someone who is wali to someone, you will be the enemy of someone who is an enemy to him. So it is, even without it being part of the hadith, it is conceived. It is like, you know, unacceptable. So coming to that part, the extras afterwards, when the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam talks about the verse that was revealed to him, al-yawma akmaltu lakum dinakum, this bit is not accepted by the Sunni scholars. Starting from that bit, the talking about the ayah of Ikmaluddin, the verse of Ikmaluddin, al-yawma akmaltu lakum dinakum. Not the incident of the ayah, but that part was added to the hadith as it was narrated by the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They don't accept that, but we will talk about this part as being a separate event, and it's linked to this. Okay, and can we just move? The Ghadeer, the place, the area, the event, and what happened before and what happened after from both sides. So Al-Ghadeer, even in Arabic, it means like, you know, a creek of water. So Ghadeer Khum is the name of the place where there was a Ghadeer, and the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, on his way back from Hajj, they were resting there, and the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam gathered the Muslim there and delivered this sermon, what is known as Khutbat al-Ghadeer, Ghadeer Khum, and it's a place between Mecca and Medina. There are, like, you know, some like disagreement about, like, you know, how close it is to Mecca and how close it is to the Medina, but the geographical part is not that essential in that discussion. And that was towards the end of the life of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because that was on the 10th year of Hijrah. On the 10th year of Hijrah, and even the pilgrimage was called as Hajjatul Wada', the farewell. So it was understood that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is going to give the Muslim some of the recommendations. Of course, they didn't know that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ is about to die, but the Prophet himself, he knew, and it's later going to be confirmed by the revelation of the verse, Al-Yawma Akmaltu Lakum. It means that there is the completion of and the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was ready to meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, if we can... The speech and the different parts of the speech and the language that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam used. And on that part, I'm going to focus on the word wali. And because here comes the main argument. Already 10 minutes passed. Wow. Okay, this topic needs more time. But anyway, so the word wali comes from the root verb waliya. And there is wala yali. Comes a linguistic disagreement because some of the Shia scholars, they say that the word wali is the same like the word wali. The Sunni scholars reply, and this is crucial because a big portion of the argument is about the semantics of the word. Because the word was mentioned in Quran in a lot of instances, talking about being good, talking about being supportive, talking about being loving, and so it can carry all those meanings. And even the word mawla in Arabic, it can be used as someone who has a position of authority. It can be used as a slave. It can be used as a master. They say, هذا مولى هذا. It means he is his slave. And it can mean the master at the same time. But of course, from the context, you would understand the meaning. So, and it can mean a friend, and there are a lot of derivation of the word in Quran that are used in a vast, levels of meaning, ranging from a slave going all the way up to someone who is in control or a position of authority. So, some of the Sunni scholars reply by saying, no, wali is different from wali. When you say wali, it can carry different interpretation. When you say wali, it means a ruler, and it was never used other than this. You say, هذا والي هذه البلد. That's it. You're not going to be confused about this. هو الوالي هو الحاكم. الوالي is the ruler. But after a quick research regarding this and being involved in linguistics, I would argue that this counter argument is not valid enough to be sincere and honest about this. Why is that? Because going back to the language, waliya and wala yali both come from the same root. So using this as a counter argument is not valid enough because they are used interchangeably. So it's not an enough counter argument about the semantics of the word wali and wali, and because there are even different narration that says mawla and wali. So again, we will come to the point that we are going to talk about the event itself, and the context of it. So that's one point. Can we, one more please? Yeah. What is the context tells us, aside from the semantics? The Sunni scholars talk about the context from the perspective of this story about Sayyidina Ali ibn Abi Talib radiallahu anhu coming back from Yemen with the Muslim armies after going all over the place, fighting here and there, and they had the spoils of war with them, the trophies and the things that they gained from the wars. And before, it was the Eid time and Hajj, and some of the commanders in the army who were below Sayyidina Ali ibn Abi Talib radiallahu anhu, they thought the people of Mecca are, they are going to be like ready with all the beautiful garments and like, it's Eid and Hajj and things. So they distributed some of those spoils of war, some of the garments that they had on the army, on the soldiers. When Sayyidina Ali saw that, he said, what happened? Who? And they said, oh, because of this. And they gave the explanation to Sayyidina Ali ibn Abi Talib, and Sayyidina Ali ibn Abi Talib didn't like it. And he ordered the army to take off all the garments that they put on and return them to the spoils, because they had no right to make a judgment about this, as Sayyidina Ali was the commander at that time. Anyway, some of the people in the army frowned upon this decision because they wanted to appear nice when they enter. And some of them said few words about Sayyidina Ali that were not good. And that reached the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. I'm talking from the Sunni perspective. That reached the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, and that was the reason that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam gave the khutbah and mentioned Sayyidina Ali and stressed the fact that he is one of the most beloved to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam and everyone should love him. And this is going to the interpretation that the word wali means a beloved person, someone who is a friend or a brother or a beloved person. So they say that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam did this to counter what happened from some of the people who were in the army. That's putting it in a context. Of course, this incident in some Shia sources is denied completely, as it didn't exist. And aside, of course, and some other few sources would mention it, but they say that it is not linked to this. And like one of the biggest references is الشيخ العلامة المفيد في كتابه الإرشاد في معرفة حجج الله على العباد. And in the book Al-Irshad, he will go extensively about what happened and talk about the sequence of events. And he's going to link what happened to this, but not, again, as just a historian and a scholar. He didn't mention it in the context of saying that this is why the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam said that. But he just mentioned that this happened and then this happened. But in other sources they say they were totally separate events. And some even say that the incident of Sayyidina Ali coming and the army, that took place afterwards. Of course, here the timeline is important because it would put the khutbah of the Prophet ﷺ after this or before it. And it's quite significant because, as I said, two arguments from the Sunni sides regarding the semantics, and it's not enough strong argument. And the other thing is regarding the context. So this is like the biggest one, because if we put the event of Sayyidina Ali coming back with the army after, then the context is lost. And if we put it before, then yes, there is a context to this. If we can just move forward. Yes. Move forward. I just only have 5 minutes. Okay. Going to the interpretation of what's agreed upon, aside from anything about the topic of Khilafah. So as I said, I'm being moderate. I'm presenting both arguments without claiming that this is right or this is wrong. That will be for the panel to decide and see what is actually there. From what's agreed upon, no one can deny. This is something that I can say clearly, that Sayyidina Ali held such a high position, maybe the highest in the heart of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam and all the companions at that time. And even with the interpretation of the word wali as a beloved or a brother, and the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam mentions Sayyidina Ali by name and repeats it in different contexts, this is enough of pride and honor for Sayyidina Ali ibn Abi Talib. Putting it together with Sayyidina Ali ibn Abi Talib blood relation to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Not only blood relation that came with righteousness and a seerah that will take volumes to speak about Sayyidina Ali and what he contributed to the Muslim da'wah. And giving the status of Sayyidina Ali within the heart of the companions, and with the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam marrying him his daughter Sayyida Fatima al-Zahra radiallahu anha, being the son of Sayyidina al-Hasan and al-Husayn, and like putting all of this together, no Muslim in his right mind can argue that Sayyidina Ali didn't have a right to Khilafah. Dr. Ahmed Karima, one of the ulama of Al-Azhar al-Sharif, he said that Sayyidina Ali had the right to Khilafah. So, but what's afterwards? What is the question that should be asked? For me to ask the Shia side, something that I couldn't come to a conclusion to, a point to discuss further. Talking from the narrations, the amount of the companions that were there, and I cannot digest and comprehend that none of the companions came together even to discuss the matter and say, like, this cannot happen. I'm not talking about one or two in particular, I'm talking about thousands. If there was such a thing that it was clear to the companions that Sayyidina Ali had to be the Khalifa, and look at my wordings, he had every right to be the Khalifa. But had he had to be the Khalifa? This is my point. He had every right to. Was it snapped out of him forcibly, or it was a political decision that was made? And that was one point that I won't be able to cover right now, because of the haditha of As-Saqifa and the Ansar coming together trying to appoint Sa'd ibn Ubadah, the head of Al-Khazraj, and part of Banu Sa'ida, and Sayyidina Umar ibn al-Khattab trying to make a quick decision about this, and the Muslims are going to split, and then appointing Abu Bakr, and then what happened? So my reading into this, was it more of a political decision or a competition over who is going to be the Khalifa? The appointment of any of the Khulafa before Sayyidina Ali, does it invalidate their Khilafah because Sayyidina Ali had a right to it? Why Sayyidina Ali ibn Abi Talib? And Sayyidina Ali ibn Abi Talib, he is strong enough, eloquent enough, elegant enough to just disapprove of this, because it wasn't just, if it wasn't just he had the right to, but he had to be, because had he had to be, he wouldn't have agreed with any of what happened. Because it would be an appointment by the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam that he cannot take away, he himself, even if all the Muslims are against him. And it's inconceivable that this could have happened. This is actually what I came, or I reached at the end. And for the Sunni side, isn't it time for us to touch on those areas and give Sayyidina Ali ibn Abi Talib what he deserves, without being sensitive about the part that would say, if you say he had the right to Khilafah, it means that Sayyidina Abu Bakr or Umar or any of the Khilafah who came before him didn't have any right to? If we come to that point and we agree on this, then we can move further to see what would actually happen if Sayyidina Ali was the Khalifa. What would have been done differently at that time, and why the companions carried on and the message of Islam carried on, because of the understanding of the companions who were present at that time. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to, so you can just move quickly to the thank you part. Yeah, that's, yeah, it's.
When question answer, inshallah, will be
All right.
all things, inshallah.
All right, Jazakumullahu khairan, and thank you very much. It is just quite too big of a topic to be covered in 20 minutes. I hope I have delivered something, and sorry, but I couldn't conclude it enough. I don't know why. Jazakumullahu khairan.